We have wariness about caring and nourishment. We have a protection against an abuse of generosity. So we can see that there will be people in my life around me who will bring in this, I'm not going to be simply giving to you. Like, I'm not going to give you everything. I'm not going to let you abuse my generosity. I can find these people in my life, and I can tell you what, I have seen these people in my life who are not willing to be overly generous with me. Like, yes, they can be generous, and they're very wary against the potential that I might abuse that generosity. And it's been such a mental trip for me to get over, because I have good natures on the inside. I want what's best for all of us. I come from love, and I'm here to share it. And then, whoa, hold on, scarcity consciousness, the fears. I'm not going to let you abuse this. I need you to prove to me that you're not going to abuse my trust and my generosity. And over here in the 39, there's single-mindedness, the rare ability not to overcome, but to bypass obstacles. You see, this is people who may not want to overcome their problems. These are people who might provoke me because they're not willing to have the risk of their generosity be abused, and they also don't want to get over their problems. They don't want to escape that scarcity mindset. And I have to let that be part of life. There's people around and they're going to do those things, and it's simply part of the program for my experience. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. Hello there, and welcome to Dharma Science Radio. My name is Ian, and I deeply love and appreciate every single chance that I have to share a little bit of myself with you for the benefit of us all. And so today we're going into something that I'm very excited about. I am announcing through demonstration a new offering, a new service. This is something I have recently learned that has been on the back burner for many years, actually. As a third line profile, I have been very disinterested in the transit field and the solar returns, or the Saturn returns, or the Uranus oppositions, or the Chiron returns, all of this stuff. All of this has not been very interesting to me. As a third line, I've been more interested in learning from my own direct experience and not reaching out into the program and seeing what it has in store for me. It simply did not make sense to look into that for me. My authority said no for many years. And then recently, I listened and I watched and I undertook a course from Ra Uru Hu on the life cycles analysis. And so this is essentially the title of my new offering. It's called a life cycle analysis. And when I listened and watched and followed along and learned from Ra about these cycles, it was incredibly profound for me now that I finally had the sacral inner authority, yes, to dive into this information. It was quite profound, and I actually found myself bawling my eyes out, crying tears of joy and relief and sorrow and the whole gamut of the human experience. Simply getting in touch with the mechanisms of what's in store for me in the future. The simple fact that I can look into the future mechanistically, that I can get a preview of what's to come and not be told exactly this is going to happen and then this is going to happen. However, I can see very clearly that there are themes at play. There are forces at work, and I can get in touch with and describe these forces. And it was simply witnessing my own chart going through these returns that by the time I'm 40 or 50 years old, the impact of these charts and what is coming for me was so profound. I felt like there were visions from my childhood, visions I've had of my future, dreams that I've had, which were immediately validated and given fresh new insight and fresh new details as to what it means for my future. And so depending on whether or not I am living true to myself will determine if I will suffer the consequences of my future or whether I will be ready to bask in the joy and the glory and the wonder of what is to come for me. And so the basic idea of today's video is to talk about only one portion of this life cycle analysis. This is basically a preview getting in touch with these forces. And so today we'll be talking about my personal Saturn return, the first Saturn return, which for me began a few years ago. This begins around 28 years of age, or 30 years of age is the general span for when this force begins in one's life. For you see, each person has their own sensitivities and their own proclivities, which give them their nature. And depending upon that nature will influence whether or not you recognize the return happening even before it happens, whether you can feel it directly, immediately in the moment, or whether you only notice it a year or more after the fact that it's happened. And so without further ado, we will dive into the charts here. And so first off, what we're looking at here is my conventional chart, my birth chart, my natal chart, which includes the moment of my birth, a snapshot of the cosmos from my perspective. And it also includes 88 degrees of the sun before my birth as my unconscious differentiation imprint. And so these two work together to create the holistic juxtaposition of who and what I am, this vehicle that I am, and how that vehicle travels along the pathway of life. And so if you know something about human design, you'll know that on the left over here is that unconscious design that I was talking about. And you know that on the right over here is the conscious personality. And so this conscious personality is basically who I think I am. And this unconscious is who other people see me as primarily, what they can easily see and what is not so easy for me to see. And so the first thing that I'd like to bring up is the notion of this 1-3 profile. Because before I can even go into my Saturn return chart, before that can make any sense or have any meaning, I need to know who I am and how to make decisions correctly as myself. Because otherwise, the Saturn return is basically a fantasy, and it's basically a description of you're going to suffer because of this, that, and the other. And that's not a fun reading to give. And so in order to give the true self reading, to be able to describe what can be available in the heights of the beauty and the joy of life, I need to know who I am and how to make decisions correctly as myself. And so that begins here, and something easy to look into is the profile, because we can all resonate with the profile. It is this outer boundary and barrier that gives us a connection for communication and observation and interaction with the other. It's like a social role. And so I'm a 1-3 profile. Basically, this means that my personality is coming at life from a deeply foundational level that begins insecure. It begins fearful. Because I'm coming from the very foundation, and I have discovered that foundations are not solid. I have discovered that people are lying and the truth is difficult to find. And so the ultimate purpose of this first line is to grow up, is to mature. Because this first line, as it learns and grows in life, it loses the fear because it understands the mechanisms. It understands what is happening. It has learned a great deal, and now it can be a teacher of others for how to go around the fear, how to go through the fear, and how to mature that into knowing, into understanding, into intelligence. And so on the other side of this, over here on the unconscious side, we can see my third line design. And now this third line is very fun because it's all about this material world. It's all about the trial and error of learning and attuning to the material plane, you know, where things actually happen a certain way. They don't always happen the way we think they ought to happen. They happen the way that they do happen. And the thing about these third lines is that we have the ability to really get in touch with the material world and how things actually happen, independent of what we think for how they should happen. And in the not-self, we become very wrapped up in how things have gone wrong. For the third line is always pushing up against the boundaries and the barriers, and it's finding what is unstable. It is finding what is not secure. And it can often be blamed for that, or it can often get caught up in that field. And so in order to get outside of that not-self, outside of the vortex feeling, to get into the joy and the true self of the blessings for this third line, we need to be able to make decisions correctly through what is called type strategy and inner authority. And so in order to talk about my own strategy and authority, we must be looking at this body graph here in the center. So the first thing we see is that down here, the sacral center is defined. And because this sacral center is defined, that gives me a generator aura type, which means that I am here to respond to life, that I have an open and enveloping aura that is attracting everything to me that belongs to me. And by trusting the timing of life and trusting my inner yes or no, my or by trusting that, I can have the life I was born to live and not the life that my mind gets caught up in imagining based on other people's expectations and projections. And so that is the strategy for the generator aura type, is to trust the gut response, to trust the inner yes and the inner no that arises out of life's timing that is brought to me. And it's not about going out there and making something happen. You know, that's the manifester style, is they get an impulse and, oh, I've got to do this. I'm going to let you know, and boom, I am off. I am doing something. I am making an impact. And as a generator, that's not my life. This was one of the greatest and largest pieces of relief I had ever felt when I first got into studying and practicing and experimenting with human design. And so another piece that was a deep relief for me is over here in the emotional center. I can see that I have emotional definition. This means that truth is not available in the now moment, and there is only relative clarity. This means that I need to have patience. I need to be able to wait for feelings. No matter how intense they are, I need to wait for the feelings to subside. I need to wait for them to relax. If I am feeling very strongly about something and my mind is going crazy, amplifying all kinds of thoughts and feelings and emotions and behaviors and tendencies from others, that means there's no decision to be made right now. That means I need to center myself. I need to still myself. I need to wait for the process of life to unfold. I need to give it time. The most basic and fundamental strategy here is sleep on it. You know, wait until tomorrow. Do I still want to do this thing tomorrow, or have things changed as the hours have gone by after I have slept on something? Is it feeling different? Because feelings are never a substitute for clarity. And by waiting for this clarity, that will only arrive after some time of waiting, you know, which is breathing fundamentally, I can find clarity. And I can see what my gut response actually is. And not the mental amplification that goes wild. I can see what my gut has to say. I can see what my body has to say. For the body is the authority in the life. The personality is just this piece of consciousness, you know, this thing that's here to watch the movie unfold. And who is the star in that movie? That is the body itself. The body is the life, as Ra liked to say. And so that is the fundamental mechanic that is oh so deeply important for me to be aware of as I go into my Saturn return, is the fact that I need to trust my gut response, and I need to allow myself to wait for clarity, to not get caught up in the mental amplification field of all the projections, expectations, and other influences from the people around me and from life. And so by trusting in my inner authority and type strategy, I have the chance to live a truly joyful life. And the same is true for each and every one of you. 1, 2, 3 undefined centers. You see these white centers here? These form undefined amplification fields, or what I like to call black holes of either ignorance or white holes of wisdom. For you see, when I am allowing my mind to mentally amplify things, basically I will be looking for love and direction outside of myself, and I will pretend to be certain about things that don't matter in order to survive. That is the fundamental survival strategy that I inherited from my ancestors, was to look for love and direction outside of myself, to find somebody who's going in a good way, to pretend that I know what I'm talking about, even though what I'm talking about does not matter. And if I can do those things, then I will survive. And that's the not-self world of suffering. And so that's what I don't have to deal with anymore, at least not as much as I used to, because I trust my sacral response and I wait for emotional clarity. And so now that we've got a little taste of my actual body graph of who I am here to be, we can move on to my Saturn return chart. And so right here, you can immediately see things are dramatically different. Every single center is defined. And it's not really that way. It's not like now I'm a 9-0 and I have this sense of direction and I can be certain about things that do matter. It doesn't quite work that way, because this is a transiting influence over here on the right. In the yellow, this is the transit of my Saturn return. This is where Saturn has returned to where it was in the moment of my birth, around 28 years or so since my birth. And over here in the blue is my actual chart. You'll see that the blue is the same of what we had previously in my natal chart. And this yellow is the Saturn return. So it does not mean that these centers are defined for the next few years or the next 30 years. It does not mean that. What it means is that there is now a new costume applied to who I am. There is a new direction on top of my direction in life. There is a new environment around me. There are people around me that will be called into my life as more dominant themes. And there are forces of developmental education in which I am not here to interfere with. I am simply here to see. And this is what I think is the biggest key, is that there are developmental forces from these outer planets that, well, it makes me think of Neptune as one example. So Neptune in the personality resonance square is called the misinformation field. And if you are to look into your Neptune field, and if you try to figure it out what's really going on there, most likely what's going to happen is that you'll trip yourself up, because it's a misinformation field. It's not about understanding what's going on. It's about, aha, that's where the misinformation will enter my field. And so when I feel misinformation from Neptune coming in from other people, or even myself, I know that that's a sign I'm on the right track. And so here in these developmental fields, this is stuff we're not here to deal with. And I'll get more into those details later. First, what I'd like to talk about is up here, there is the costume. This is the sun and the earth. And you'll notice something if you're looking at this, that there's a 5-1 profile. So I'm a 1-3. This is personal destiny. This is deeply about my own feelings, my own direction in life, my own generation of new karma, by coming in with my own personal destiny, and I have my path that I'm going to unfold, and I'm creating new karma. Now this is very different from the left angle crosses, such as this 5-1 cross. This is actually the cross of the clarion. You see, I was born as a 1-3 cross of planning, which means that I'm here to make bargains and agreements and find things that feel good and talk it out and sort things out by planning for the future. And now this 5-1 Saturn return cross is quite different. It has felt a little uncomfortable for me because I have not been allowed to simply sit in my own little personal destiny and go through and unfold and impact those that I'm meant to impact. I have been called out a little bit more. I have been in the public space. I have been given positive expectation from others that I then either must deny outright or I must live up to their expectations and deliver the goods. And so as part of my costume now, since the Saturn return, I have this 5-1 transpersonal karma situation, wherein there are allies all around me who are expecting things from me, who have been waiting for lifetimes to receive what I have to share. And so it's felt a little uncomfortable because I've been used to being this little 1-3 who simply goes about his own business. And now I'm being called upon to deliver the goods. And so that's why we find ourselves here in this exact moment where I'm delivering what I have learned. And so the next element I'd like to speak of are these nodes. The nodes formulate the direction in life that one is going. So we're coming from the south node and we're going towards the north node. And it's basically split right down the middle. And so these Saturn returns, as described by Ra, because we have an Uranian opposition coming in about 14 years or so, we are to see that within 7 years, at that 7-year mark of the Saturn return, somewhere around there, depending on the individual, everyone's experience is different after all. However, after about that 7-year point, we transition from one side of the road to the other side of the road. The classical description is that if you're on a highway or if you're on a street and the street is very, very long and it goes through all these different neighborhoods, you might notice that at one point or another, the name of the street changes. The neighborhood changes. The energy of this street changes. And so that's what the nodes are about. They are quite literally the direction in life. And something you'll see there is that they are also in the 5th line of the personality and the 1st line of the unconscious. So here we are doubling down on this 5-1, able to deliver through the projection field situation. So I have this costume where I'm this 5-1 who is here to deliver the goods or be burnt at the stake because I'm a heretic and I'm not practical. And not only is that my costume, that's also the environment I'm within, that I'm meant to be around people who can go in this delivery system as well. The next situation we'll look at is the inner planets. This includes the moon, this includes Mercury, this includes Venus, and this includes Mars. So these planets, most particularly the moon, which forms the most dynamic and shifting and impactful people in the life, for these inner planets will bring about and call forth different people in your life to bring certain forces. And so as a simple, quick little taste of that, we'll see that here we have wariness about caring and nourishment. We have a protection against an abuse of generosity. So we can see that there will be people in my life around me who will bring in this, I'm not going to be simply giving to you, you know? Like, I'm not going to give you everything. I'm not going to let you abuse my generosity. I can find these people in my life, and I can tell you what, I have seen these people in my life who are not willing to be overly generous with me. Like, yes, they can be generous, and they're very wary against the potential that I might abuse that generosity. And it's been such a mental trip for me to get over because I have good natures on the inside. I want what's best for all of us. I come from love and I'm here to share it. And then, whoa, hold on. Scarcity consciousness, the fears. I'm not going to let you abuse this. I need you to prove to me that you're not going to abuse my trust and my generosity. And over here in the 39, there's single-mindedness, the rare ability not to overcome, but to bypass obstacles. You see, this is people who may not want to overcome their problems. These are people who might provoke me because they're not willing to have the risk of their generosity be abused, and they also don't want to get over their problems. They don't want to escape that scarcity mindset. And I have to let that be part of life. There's people around and they're going to do those things, and it's simply part of the program from my experience. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. For, firmly I believe life is perfect. It is only in my imagination that I can fantasize about how I think things could be better, or how things should be. And yet that's a delusion I no longer participate with. For I've seen too many things that I can't even communicate. I know that life is a perfect mechanism, and it's only in my imagination and my delusions that I can get out of the vortex of love and imagine myself in fear and scarcity and get lost in that. However, it's not so much fun, so I've moved on from most of that. And so down here, we've got the Mercury, we've got the Mars, and we've got the Venus. Those make up the different people, and so we'll talk a little bit more about these people and what they're bringing a little later. Next up, we have the outer planets, and this one is my favorite subject. This is what I was talking about earlier. We have, I think this one is Jupiter, and then Saturn, and then Uranus, and then Neptune, and then Pluto. These planets bring in the developmental influences. And what's so fantastic and amazing about developmental influences is that there is nothing to do about it. This is purely for seeing life. This is for the development of my own consciousness. The fact that I can see these things happening is a reward that I am given because I trust my inner authority and type strategy. And it opens up a new layer of challenge, a new layer of wisdom potential, that I can tap into these forces, I can learn from them, and I can let them be what they are without trying to influence it. This is the ultimate challenge for myself. And so I'll dive right into my favorite one here. This is so profound for me. This is the 2.1. This is my sense of intuition. This is sensitivity to disharmony and atrophy. And so this is a deep connection and a resonation with those moon activations I mentioned earlier. This notion that people could provoke me with their scarcity mindsets, and it's because they don't want their generosity to be abused, and it's okay. It's not my business. It's not my problem. I know who I am. I exist in love. And so the thing is, this is sensitivity to disharmony and atrophy, and something I had attempted to do before I was in tune with this as a developmental force. The fact that I can keenly see with my intuition, that is atrophy. That is disharmony. That person is out of tune. That is not correct. That is wrong. I can see that. I'm very intuitive about these things. And it's not for me to say. It's not for me to do anything about. It's purely for me to become aware of and to learn from. The fact that there are forces in this world that are going downhill in a bad way. And there are things I can learn from their examples. Abraham Hicks talks about these rockets of desire that are born out of the contrast in life. When I discover what I do not want, then there is a rocket shot off of the opposite. This is what I want. I know what I don't want, which means I'm one step closer to what I do want. And these developmental planets are a deep place wherein we can learn about what we do and don't want. And the key is not to act upon them, for they are developmental. They are for seeing the seeing of the seeing. They're not for behaving on it. And so even though I have the intuition to sense disharmony, I have to allow disharmony to play its role and to go its course, to do its work. Because after all, life is perfect. It's not here for me to interfere with. I'm simply here to trust my gut. I'm simply here to wait for clarity and to trust the response that comes out of my body. And I tell you what, it can be quite surprising to hear what comes out of my mouth, because I don't know what's coming out next. I'm simply here along for the ride. And so those are a brief little overview on these planetary influences. There are even more details we can be in touch with. Over here, I've made myself a little spreadsheet to be in touch with these forces for my own Saturn return, because there are, right here, different encounter types with the transits. These are encounters with the forces of life. If you have a full channel activated, and that's over here, like say this 57-20-34, this multi-channel integration circuitry situation, this is about education for myself. This is where I can learn about the 3420. I can learn about the 3457. I can learn about the 2057, and I can learn about the 2034. And now what does that mean to learn about these things? Well, it depends on the particular planetary activations that are bringing these forces. And so right here, we can see that the 20 is being brought by my design north node. This is the gate of now, the gate of contemplation in the line of superficiality, a reliance on shallowness from my north node. So this means that quite literally, being able to move through the shallow, being able to exist on the surface of the world and not go into the depths is a skill that I am becoming educated upon, which is challenging for me. You know, I am here in my ordinary perception, I am here to go into the deep, within the deep, within the deep, and to understand exactly what is going on. This is the only way that I can feel any semblance of control in this life, is that I know how this stuff works, and I'm no longer afraid, and I trust. You know, I have what's called anti-theistic hope as my motivation. And this doesn't mean that I hate God or anything like that. In fact, I've never been an atheist. I've always been a believer. The closest I ever got was, well, I don't have any proof either way, and so I'm not sure. I never outright denied the existence of God, even as an anti-theistic hope motivation, because it seemed unnecessary, it seemed unimportant, and it seemed extreme. The thing is, anti-theistic simply means that I need to understand. I need to know what's going on. And once I understand the mechanism, now I can have hope. I understand what's going on within this computer. I understand how it works. I can see how I push the pedal on a car and the wheels turn because there's all these various components within it that function on explosive technology that burns gasoline in order to turn the wheels through, well, what I would call Stone Age technology. And that's a topic for another day. And so we can actually see right here that the design south node is the 34th gate. So this 2034 is something that's a deep part of my unconscious design's direction in life during this Saturn return experience, that I am moving from the south node to the north node. This is the 34th gate, the power of the great in the line of the bully, indiscriminate use of power. And so I would call that a shadow theme, that the bully is here to use its power without discrimination. And as somebody with a meditative tone in my motivation, I like to bring the light. And so what is the light of the bully is that it can actually recognize when it is appropriate to kind of give someone a little nudge. Like, haha, look at that. You could do better there. I know you're better. I know you're stronger. Get up. And when it's time to, oh, that's not my business. You know, that is disharmonic. That is atrophic. That does not belong to me. And I know it. And I'm going to let it be. And so I'm here to come from this great power and get into the superficiality of it all, that I can use this power on the surface, that I don't have to get lost in the depth, within the depth, within the depth. Because, golly, I could tell you what, I have spent countless hours simply researching and studying everything I could ever get my hands on in order to make sense of this life. And the last one over here is this 57. And if I look over here for the 57, I can see that is coming from, that is actually in my costume, my personality earth, intuition in the line of progression. So this 57th gate is about a gentle and penetrative, intuitive knowing in the moment that in my case is seeking progress. It is seeking movement forward that is continually occurring. To know that I can move on to the next level. And after that, I can move on to the next level. And after that, I can move on to the next level. And I can feel satisfaction in that. This is natural for us generator aura types, is that we are always striving to move on to the next level. And so this is all in the north node, the south node, and the personality earth. You know, this is my costume and my direction. This is stuff that I'm involved within. And it's not stuff I was born with. I was not born with this powerful intuition for progression, and I was not born with the 2034. You know, that channel of the manifesting generator. There's incredible power and there's incredible work to be done. There is this manifestation capacity through generation that can really get shit done. And I'm not used to it. You know, from the past, from my birth, I'm not used to having all this power on the material plane that I can then demonstrate to the world by existing in the shallow end of the pool. You know, simply being here on the surface, talking about the birds, the bees, the trees, the taxes, the work that needs to be done in the garden. My preference is generally for the deep within the deep, to get into these mechanics like I am in this moment, and yet life needs me to be educated upon the surface. I need to exist on this surface plane, and I need to learn from how to be busy and practical and productive on the material plane. And knowing this, I don't suffer. You know, I'm not bothered by the fact that the world has these crazy demands from me. What feels like crazy to me, that it's like, I need to do more. 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 And I can see very clearly how it's in the chart. I can see very clearly how it's expected of me. And so there's things about people. You might notice in this spreadsheet that I've made here that there's a few different sections. Over here on the left, there is the transit type. And this is where it gives me the information for, is this environmental? Is this electromagnetic? Is this educational? And these are key elements for understanding what is going on. Because an environmental gate is simply a hanging gate. You see, like this 22 right here, this 22nd gate is simply hanging. And that means it is part of the environment around me. When they have that full channel, as I was talking about earlier, this is education. This is where I get to learn about a fixed energy exchange between these centers and what this means. Over here in this hanging 22, I get to learn that I exist in an environment wherein this quality of the 22 is being brought. And now which 22 is that? It's the 22-5 in an outer planet. This is directness and the disregard of form when required. And so something that's very interesting about this as a developmental imprint is that this is not for me to participate with. I'm not here to be direct. I'm not here to disregard the form when required. I'm here to see that it's in the environment, that there are people around me who can disregard their bodies and they can do the work. And that's not my way. That's not my style. It's not how I exist. I am here to respect my form. Period. Full stop. End of story. I am here to honor who and what I am. And I'm here to do a lot of hard work along the way. And this is how I become open to grace, is by allowing my environment to disregard the form and to honor that it's not something I'm here to do anything about. I'm here to trust myself and my inner authority. That's it. And so I spoke earlier about this second gate here, which forms an electromagnetic with my 14. Something that is deeply powerful and profound and impactful for me is the fact that I have this intuition about what is atrophy, what is disharmony. I can see when things are out of whack. I can see when a person is speaking out of line. I can see when things are out of tune with the highest truth. And it's purely for my own education. It's purely for the development of my own consciousness. And because this is an electromagnetic connection, where the 2 is coming from the Saturn return transit, and the 14 is coming from my natal chart, my birth chart, it feels personal that it's coming to me. It's personal that these things are out of whack. And I have to let that be what it is, that yep, there are forces in this life that are out of whack. And it's not my problem. It's not my business to deal with it. It's not my business to communicate, hey, you're out of whack. It's my business to recognize, oh, that's out of whack. All right. What can I learn from this? What can that out of tune guitar teach me about what it sounds like and what it feels like and what happens when one is out of tune? And because it's a personal electromagnetic, it can feel very personal. And once I saw that, oh my God, I tell you what, that was quite a relief. It's quite profound. And it's a challenge that I work with every day in that sense. There is so much atrophy in this world. There is so much entropy in this world, so much going towards disorder, that I know that I'm here to be a force of ordering. I'm here to be a force of negative entropy. I'm here to be a force of alignment with the greater good and the highest joys and the deepest bliss. And there's so much that I could say about these charts. I could go on forever and ever and ever. And yet I don't want to do that in this moment. It's not what I'm here to do. I will, however, speak about one more thing. This 62nd gate. This is coming from my transiting design earth costume. 67, or rather 62 in the first line. This is the gate of detail, preponderance of the small, in the line of routine. So what are my routines? What are the little details of my routines? during this Saturn return. This is a big key and element for how my body, my unconscious earth, can ground onto this planet and find stability, is that I have routines and I can follow those routines. And in following those routines, I have the capacity to learn and truly be educated around this immense workload demand that is being expected of me. Because I'm following my routines, you know? As a 1-3, I learned through trial and error, and as a 5-1, I'm here to be called upon and given expectations that I will then deliver. And the only way in which I can do that is by trusting my routines that are developed out of my inner authority and type strategy, that comes out of my unconscious. And so there's a little taste of what it's like to explore a Saturn return chart, which is only a small part of a full life cycle analysis reading. In a full life cycle analysis, we will not only go through the Saturn return, we will go through the Uranus opposition, we will go through the Chiron return, and we can even touch upon the second Saturn return. Each one of these themes is a totally different world unto themselves that mark stages and milestones in a person's life. You see this Saturn return? This is all about... Well, it's pretty funny because Ra would say that somebody before their Saturn return, you know, before you're at least 30 years of age or so, you're basically useless to the world, you know? You're fumbling and bumbling around, doing your own whatever, learning through trial and error on the material plane, especially for the 6 lines. And once that Saturn return hits, things begin to shift. So it's about taking this person that is basically an infant, and how do they begin to actually mature into their role in this life? And for me, a large part of that is by getting out of my shell as a 1-3 that's been cocooned up in my own little space and doing my investigations and doing my research and doing my research and doing my research, and whoa, now I'm a clarion. I have this costume of the clarion. I'm here to toot my horn. I'm here to say something. There are people that are waiting to hear what I have to say, and I'm here to say it. And that's part of how I become practical. It's part of how I become of value to this world, is by learning how to deliver in this 5-1 costume. We will speak more about the Uranus opposition, about the Chiron return, and about the second Saturn in the following videos. Today was merely a preview to give a taste of what's going on here, because it was so profound to me. I haven't cried that hard in months, at least. And it was so profound for me to get in touch with these mechanics. And for years, I denied them. For years, I had no interest. You know, I'm a 3rd line. I'm here to learn from my own direct experience, and I don't care about whatever else is going on. You want to tell me how to live my life? Get out of here. Couldn't care less. You want to tell me what my future holds? Whatever. I trust my life. And then it happened. And then it changed. The inner authority within me, my body said, all right, it's time to learn from this stuff. It's time to get in touch with mechanics beyond yourself. And boy, was it profound. It's still profound, simply to imagine and to touch in on some of these mechanics. And so if you'd like to learn some of this, if my sharing of this simple one part of the life cycle analysis has been profound enough for you that you'd like to learn about what this stuff means in your situation, feel free to reach out. I'll have a link down below where you can actually sign up for one of these sessions, and we can begin the process. Because it's not even a simple single session where we can go into all of this. First off, we have to simply have half an hour or so to simply meet each other, to get connected, to talk about life and what's going on, and so that I can get a framework of where you're at, so that I know what to share. And then from there, after I get in touch with who you are, and you're able to share with me where you are at, then I will take that as the guidance for what is the focus going forward. Because if you're around my age, where I'm like 31 years old, this Saturn return is the most profound and relevant thing in the whole world. At least it feels that way. Whereas if you're already 40 or 42 or 45 years old, the Uranus opposition might be a little bit more important. If you're already 50 or 60 years old, it's all about the Chiron. Because at that point, this is the flowering of the unique individual being. This is, you need to know who you are and how to live as yourself on the planet, or you might not last much longer. And then finally, at that second Saturn, this is about how to enter into the next phase. This is about how to transition from life here on Earth into the next step. How to pass on gracefully with honor and dignity. And so I hope you're having a wonderful day and you've enjoyed this share, for I know that I have. That's all for now. Take care, and bye. for now.
If you have enjoyed the show and would like to learn more about how all of this applies specifically to you, then kindly refer to the link in this video's description, Private Consultation. Here, we can dive into all of the details together in a recorded call. May your signature vibration of satisfaction, success, peace, and surprise find you in a good way.